Welcome to the Whose Body Is It podcast. I'm your host, Isabella Malvin. In this episode, Alix Aharon returns with updates on her research into the dangerous dichotomy facing young girls today, either hypersexualize or desex altogether. We get into who specifically is being targeted by gender corporatism and media, who's resisting the propaganda, and the organized grooming of women and girls of all ages into the mass psychosis of gender dysphoria. We also cover the recent craze of so-called non-binary surgeries, the trans movement's desecration and appropriation of faith and religious heritage, the perverted limitlessness of hentai pornography, the insidious ways in which child sex abuse is being normalized, and the push against healthy human sexuality towards a non-human, alien-like future. Okay, so we're going to be getting into two options, the two, I would say, primary options that young girls are presented with today in 2022, which is to either ultra sex their bodies and their lives, or to desex their bodies and their lives and get sterilized. So, Alix, you and I have spoken before. The last time we recorded, you did an incredible expose on what's happening with Planned Parenthood clinics. So would you kind of start us off, maybe talking a little bit about what you've been up to this past year?
Yeah. So in terms of Planned Parenthood, I got the chance to actually go there and just walk in and actually have a consultation with them, or I tried to have a consultation with them, where, I went in with a friend. We said that we were non-binary and we wanted to see how easy it is to actually get hormones. And I was able to leave with all of the latest informed consent and the latest rundown of what Planned Parenthood is actually doing. And Planned Parenthood has now gone in to the 16 and 17-year-old range, which means that if you're 16 years old and you want to go on testosterone, you can do that now at Planned Parenthood.
Wow. And that was in the state of California, correct?
That's right. But it's more or less across the board. I mean, Planned Parenthood does want to be the one-stop shop, even for puberty blockers. They say on their website that they don't provide puberty blockers yet. So you can see that they want it to be in their wheelhouse. And of course, they are offering quite comprehensive. Now, it's not sex education, it's sexuality education, which I think is very interesting, that we've gone from a reproductive model of sex education, as in penis and vagina baby kind of reproduction and sexual health, to sexuality education. It's a big jump with just a small change of a word, really. And what I see increasing more and more is Planned Parenthood has really jumped on the success of the BLM movement, and they have an inordinate amount of information on their website about Black trans lives, Black non-binary bodies, Black trans women. This myth as well, which they also promote, is the myth of Black trans violence. I actually happened to go through the list of 40 or so Black trans women, so men who dress up as women who are also Black, and the murders. The vast majority are actually killed by their male partners. So they're really jumping on this, both the suicide myth and the murder myth. And also they're trying to tie gender identity to race, as if, you're a racist, you're disgusting. Well, you're a transphobe, you're just as bad as a racist, right? And Planned Parenthood also does offer specific services for free to people who identify as both trans or non-binary and a person of color. But it's very important to reiterate time and time again, Black people do not want to transition. When you look at the teenagers and the youth of 12 to 25 years old, there's a massive study that's done by GLSEN every 2 years of 25,000 youth. Only 2.5 to 1.9% are Black. So this is not even a discussion. I mean, they're talking complete nonsense when they're trying to say that this is a very white middle class movement. Very, very much so, especially with the young people.
It seems to be that all of the kind of doula, midwifery, women's health, what used to be called women's health organizations, they mimic. It's almost as if they're shadowing the Planned Parenthood kind of protocol, right? Like the NGOs and Planned Parenthood, like for example, the doula training organization that I certified with, years ago, they have similar offerings specific to Black and brown, trans identified or non-binary individuals, aka women, who want to become doulas. Like there's this as you said, a kind of myth that this is the like ultra oppressed group who's being murdered, yada yada. Oh, actually, that would be the men. They're more catering towards women who are mutilating their bodies, who also happen to be Black and brown women. But from what you described with the GLSEN, kind of a study, this is such a small percentage of the population, but they have to play that up to trigger people's fear, right, of being phobic, prejudice, when in fact, as you said, it's mostly white, middle class, adolescent girls who are really the target of this ideology.
Yeah, and let's just talk about that a little bit more. I went into the data for the word, if you go actually on the Gender Mapper page, if you go to despite endless corporate propaganda, Black youth are not transitioning. So I did a graph of when the term Black trans lives matter started to be used. And it only started ever to be used in the last 5 years between 14th and 20th of June, which is actually when a Black man was murdered, not a Black trans woman. And then drilling down further into the studies, the exact number is 2.5 who are African American or Black, versus 68.9, which are white. And it's actually interesting because GLSEN has produced 170 pieces of content that contain the term Black queer, yet only 170 mentions of the actual word woman. Right? I mean, that's incredible. Really, wow. Really incredible, because it seems to me that Planned Parenthood and GLSEN and those two groups are inextricably linked, that 14% of American youth are Black, right? So when there's a 2.2% interest in transitioning or in identifying as trans, you can see they're not biting, they're not interested. But yet they keep pushing. I can't escape the language of the Black and brown queer. Often you don't even get the words of homosexual, heterosexual. It's all incredibly obfuscated language. And I see I very rarely nowadays in 2021 and 2022, I very rarely see the word trans on its own. I'm only seeing the signals for trans and non-binary. And this is absolutely being just really forced through the general, like basically through the public.
I had that experience too, just with like email newsletters and campaigns during all the George Floyd madness. It was like support Black trans women. I'm like, do you have, I didn't get a single email about just Black women, like raising money for Black women. There was literally not a single one, not a single meme, not a single email campaign, not a single fundraiser that was exclusively for Black women. Yeah.
And organizations have really jumped on this. I mean, HRC, the Human Rights Campaign, the same as the ACLU, have completely jumped as well with the combining of Black and the combining of women. But when they don't really mean Black, they mean this weird gender thing, and they don't mean women, they mean trans women. So it's the ACLU has completely kind of redefined their vision, and the HRC as well. And I find it incredibly troubling that the HRC has a number of former allies or former spokespeople who seem to have no feeling that they're gender dysphoric or expressing anything about their gender. And then a couple of years after being connected with the HRC, they end up coming out. The first person, obviously, that I think about is Ellen Page. Ellen Page was an HRC spokesperson, but another interesting one that I find is Sarah Ramirez. So she was named in 2015 or 2016 an HRC official ally. So she was a heterosexual ally, and she was speaking at conferences at the HRC as an official ally. They didn't call her the cishet ally, but she was just an ally. She was in a heterosexual relationship with a man for a very long time. This is 45-year-old Sarah Ramirez, who now plays the non-binary character Shay Diaz in And Just Like That. But I found it very strange that long-haired, very gender-conforming Sarah Ramirez is involved with the HRC for a couple of years. And then at the age of 47, she is no longer in the heterosexual relationship, and now is saying that she is a non-binary they person, cut off her hair, and also is now, I think she identifies as queer, but who knows what that means. But this shows me that the HRC, I believe, actually may be grooming people to come out as some kind of non-binary, some kind of trans. Maybe it's all, has Demi Lovato been involved with the HRC? Demi Lovato also is, by the way, is a very interesting non-binary study, because Demi Lovato, as we all know, teenage star, Disney star. I personally think she is very, very talented vocally. She clearly has a talent, whatever. She has this sort of career crisis. She has a drug overdose. It's very, very sad. She starts doing this podcast, and Demi Lovato was kind of somebody who I would like to say is one of these hypersensitive millennials. Like, everything offends her, everything is a microaggression, everything reminds her of her trauma, sort of, just a very kind of she's very inaccessible. I just do not relate to her at all. But she goes into a yogurt shop and she starts complaining because the fact that they offer a low fat or a low sugar or a diet version of their product, it's triggering her eating disorder. right? That's what she said. And she writes it on Twitter and everybody goes, Demi, why are you being such a weirdo? This is so strange. 1 week later, 1 week after that, she announces on her podcast, I'm non-binary and I identify as a they, them. And she's going and she's being interviewed on Good Morning America. People are saying, congratulations,
Oh my
Demi.
God.
It's actually, it's a form of mass psychosis. The non-binary thing is really a form of mass psychosis, because when I hear somebody continually using they, them pronouns to talk about a person, I'm just like, that's replacing the words which you ordinarily use and forcing yourself to use unnatural language so that you don't get into trouble. And the Sex and the City is a very important reminder of that. So, Sex and the City was not, Sex and the City was a very middle of the road kind of thing about women in their 30s living in New York. You can argue that, yes, it was sexist, yes, it was silly, whatever. But these women, you didn't look at them and think they're aliens. You could see, of course, they were caricatures, right? They were all, their personalities were dialed up 1,000,000%, but you could see, okay, people like that do exist. With this latest reboot, it's been completely redone, completely remodeled. There's all of these non-binary characters. They're actually behaving as if these 55-year-old women have never in their lives gone outside. Charlotte's daughter, who's was the kind of the brunette character, her daughter says to her a very flippant remark, that she no longer feels like a girl. And then in the next episode, they're sitting at an interview at the school because her name has got to be changed and her pronouns have to be respected. So this is, what on earth has this got to do with I was thinking to myself, you could do a show about a group of women in their 50s. I mean, even then, that's a pretty interesting thing to do, because we generally don't get TV shows that are centered around women over the age of 25. But you have these women in their 50s and they're completely swallowed up in this nonsense. Carrie Bradshaw is referring to herself as a cis woman in the first scene. Right? This is mind control. Mm-hmm. This is mind control.
Mm-hmm. And you can tell, the sickest part, which I'm surprised that they even included. I mean, I guess, so there's a scene where she's in the elevator with the podcast host, the non-binary podcast host. And she's basically threatening her. And she's saying, if you don't talk about your self-pleasure practices on the podcast, you will be fired. You will no longer be invited to do this with us. And Carrie, you can tell she feels super uncomfortable. Her character feels super uncomfortable, but it's framed and as her kind of working through her own prudish tendencies or her own just outdated, right? The whole show is the message that I got was that women in their 50s are doing what they can and really working through their inner, phobias and kind of catching up with the times. And, they might not get it the first time. It might take 2 or 3 times, but they'll get it, right. And then Charlotte's in the scene you described where they're at the parent teacher conference. She's insulted that the teacher assumes that she wouldn't be on board to affirm her daughter's delusion. Mm-hmm. And then her husband expresses gratitude, that he says his line is I've never been so humbled to be told that my daughter isn't a girl. Mm-hmm. What?
I think the whole thing is actually one big Karen meme, because the whole Karen meme is incredibly misogynistic, because it's depicting a particular type of person, you are now a Karen if you don't want to affirm your daughter's non-binary status. You are a Karen if you don't want to talk about self-pleasure at the age of 55, and they continually mention their ages like they're, you know, 1 foot in the grave or something. And also I find it's very difficult to watch TV shows nowadays because you're being lectured. Why on earth are we being told about the whole thing is a Karen name, like Miranda's character has lived in New York for 50 years, okay, and she is actually acting and pretending as if she has never in New York met a person with braids. I mean, that's just beyond crazy. I mean, it just absolutely would never happen. And by the way, nobody likes it either because it does not connect. It doesn't connect with your average individual because especially with the non-binary stuff, because it is so dissociative and so alienating. And I really pray to God that Sarah Ramirez in real life and also her character does not go down the path road of medicalization. Because 1 year ago when we spoke, I would have told you that I didn't think Ellen Page was actually going to medicalize. And now she has obviously had the double mastectomy and also had is also on hormone replacement therapy. So I would really want to say to everybody, don't think that non-binary is some kind of arbitrary identity. It's not goth. It's not piercing your ears. It's not a latest fad. People can have non-binary surgeries where they will remove, and I know you probably want to get into this later, but they will remove body parts from you for this non-binary. There is non-binary surgeries, there is non-binary medicine. So if your friend or your kids are telling you they're non-binary, don't just say, oh, it's like being a goth, or it's like being a rocker, or it's like, you know, David Bowie wearing some eyeshadow. No, it's nothing like that. It's not gender bending. It's not cross-dressing. It's absolutely not that. Non-binary is very, very popular. And it's very, very concerning that they're genuinely medicalizing people who don't feel female, don't feel male, or just don't fit into whatever the gender binary. I mean, it's not a complete nonsense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of people, it's hard to imagine the leap from pronouns to, you know, someone making a cavity out of your son's penis. But this is what's happening, right? Like the pronoun thing does not exist in a vacuum. It does not end there. That is the gateway. That is, you know, I wouldn't say the beginning because they're already there. But that is the trajectory. That's where all of this goes. You know, again, it can, you know, some parents will intervene and there is hope for, you know, some kids who are kind of on this path who then, you know, kind of turn back before they've medically, you know, had all this shit done to their bodies. But that is a huge warning sign. Like if your kid or your friend or your niece or your you know student is starting to say that they are non-binary, like full stop, this is a crisis. It ends with sterilization.
Not only that, because I would say that sterilization is actually a much better outcome for you than a lot of the non-binary surgeries. If I can just kind of tell you a little bit about what they are. So Align Surgical Associates is one of the ones that I managed to I actually went to their actually physically went there in San Francisco, and they're sort of at the forefront of the non-binary surgeries. So what they promise is for the patients who identify as non-binary, it's critical to understand what appearance will best affirm their gender. At Align Surgical, we will take the time to get to know you and understand the types of change in appearance you're looking for. This is your genitals, I want to remind everybody. Then they say the procedures required to meet your goals may involve various from the standard top surgery, that's standard, and bottom surgery techniques. So this is what they say they will do. They will do nullification, right? And nullification is when you, if you're a man, you remove the penis, right? So there's like a little nub left over, right? Imagine it's as crude as me saying snip, right? I mean, it's as crude as me saying that and disgusting as me saying that. And then it looks as though a scar forms on top of that. And then that is the nullification for the men. You also can have a penectomy, which is when the penis is lopped off, like I said. Orchiectomy, which is the balls are removed. Now, this is where they start to get crazy. Phallus preserving vaginoplasty. Okay, so the phallus preserving vaginoplasty is when you will keep your penis. I don't have one. I don't know why I'm going like that, but you will keep the penis, and then ordinarily to create the vaginoplasty, they would need the tissue of the penis to stuff it all up inside like a banana and create the hole. But now they just literally drill a hole inside of you. So you have a hole for penetration, and you keep your penis. Then you have the vagina preserving phalloplasty, which is where you have the fake penis, which is made out of your arm, and also you keep your vagina. Then you have non-binary top surgery, and what non-binary top surgery appears to be is that it appears to be exactly the same as ordinary top surgery, or what they appear to do is a simple breast reduction. And they're reframing this as a non-binary because they're trying to meet a demand, right? You're non-binary, therefore you must do something about it, right?
Right. Because there wasn't so much of a market for non-binary medicine like a couple of years ago. Is that right? Like this is relatively new. Of course they're going to capitalize. It's like, it's a whole new market.
It's hocus pocus as well. I mean, it really is hocus pocus. The people that are offering the non-binary surgeries, they're really, they say that you have life-changing gender confirmation and a profound sense of completion, right? Now, if you are in such a state of distress that you're wanting to sit down and with a surgeon come up with the plans for your own genital surgery, you're in deep trouble. You are in deep, deep trouble. As a person, there is no way that you can look at somebody and they're saying to you, okay, listen, I want you to remove my penis and I want you to, drill a hole inside of me because of this way that I feel. And also, if a woman says to you that she wants to have her vagina literally sewn up so that she's like a Ken doll, I would be like, what the hell happened to you? What happened to you that makes you want to have this genital surgery? Because in a way, I don't support it, but in a way, I can understand the vaginoplasty. Right? Because you think about somebody having this massive fetish or massive a sense of whatever, and they think that if they have something that looks like a vagina, they might feel a bit better about themselves, right? I can kind of get that. Maybe, but not really. And the same with the phalloplasty. It serves a purpose, right? Whether it's crazy or not, it serves a purpose, getting this thing attached to you, because it's what men have, and you think you're a man. So in some way, it kind of makes a bit of sense. But the non-binary surgeries, it doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever, or any sense to anybody, because what you're doing is you're attempting to remove any evidence that you have a physical, biological sex. And I think that the move to that, it really feels like it's going in this incredibly non-human future. It feels like it's going towards, whether it's deliberate transhumanism, where eventually, the ideas about transhumanism, they're just endless, basically. But it seems to me to be this decision that you are going to be a sexless being, both you're not going to have a sex, and also you're absolutely not going to have any sex, because you've done this to your genitals. And that's the way that you will be happy. And 90% of non-binary identified individuals are female. So we can see it as a form of intense female self-loathing.
Yeah, absolutely. And like the promise on the excerpt from the site that you read, the achieving the profound state of completion, like it's just, it takes it to this spiritual component, like a enlightenment, that this is the path to enlightenment. And I think if people think that they are going to reach a state of ultimate bliss and like heaven on earth, I mean, they really sell it as heaven on earth. Like it is worth the sacrifice. It's worth the pain. It's worth the money. It's worth the separation from your family and friends, like whatever it takes, it's worth it. And so the pain and the surgery, like is almost, it's a non-issue. I mean, like, obviously you and I cringe at the thought of this happening. I think most people do, but the state of mind that these individuals, these poor women are in is the promise of enlightenment.
And, it's being glamorized really in the mainstream media, not just by places like Sex and the City. I mean, when I read Mac McClellan's piece in the New York, the New York Magazine? Yes, it was New York Magazine, where she said that at the same time that she put all of her money into the phalloplasty, she also bought herself a burial plot because she was ready to die. It was that, that magazine was so widely detested. And I think that maybe that's what we have to do. We have to allow them to speak. Many uninformed people who are just good individuals, right? Good people. Many of them will kind of understand that people get surgeries to make them men or women, right? And maybe they don't really get it, but they're like, okay, if it makes you happy, blah, 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 right? And maybe people might go along with that. But when you start to say to your average person that they're doing non-binary surgeries, this level of, and they're performing this level of harm to somebody, almost nobody thinks it's okay. I mean, we're talking like, I would say 99% of the population thinks this is insane. And it's our job to tell them, wait, this is actually going on. This isn't science fiction. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. Go to Align Surgical, Google it, call them up yourself, look at the pictures. This isn't some kind of, I wish I was making this up. I wish this was a big lie, because it's really quite frightening to me that our nieces and nephews and future grandchildren are going to inherit this type of a planet where they do non-binary surgeries. And it's only 2022. Who knows what's going to happen over the next couple of years with the advancement and the normalization of these procedures. I mean, it's crazy, absolutely crazy. And Also, if you go to Dr. Gallagher, who I think Dr. Gallagher is a psychopath. I really do. I look in her eyes and I see something ain't right. But that picture of her putting her arm around, or holding, linking arms with that self-harm victim. These people are anti-human. These people are moralists, literally morally bankrupt. She knows what she's doing. Because her reviews on her website, it's like, you're a butcher, you're harming women. She knows there is no way she can escape what she's doing. She knows very well that she's on thin ice. If I was her, I would be very, very afraid.
Yeah, I wonder what will come of these doctors, in the next 10, 20 years. But I also worry that like 5, 10 years from now, people who are so entrenched in gender ideology will look back on this time and say, oh, yes, it was really sad that there were so many bacterial infections and we just didn't have the technology to do the best that we can. But now we have the most advanced technology so that your post-op is shorter, and that you don't have a numbing sensation for weeks at a time, and that your cavity doesn't smell like feces anymore, because now we don't actually have to invert the colon of young boys to make neo-vaginas. I hope there's part of me that hopes that it'll just be so fucking botched that people will wake up and there will be lawsuits. And then the other part of me fears that, as you said, like the technology will just get so much more advanced that the time it takes to have the surgery, to recover, like everything will be shortened, because, so that's my fear. But yeah, I mean, I totally agree that the people performing these surgeries are psychopaths. And like, I think that we have been groomed as a population and desensitized so much to women's suffering that I myself can look back, obviously not to the degree of ever thinking that non-binary surgery was like normal, but like I can look back and see the ways that I've been desensitized to women suffering in my own life, to the women around me, to women I've supported. Like the desensitization process is a lifetime of cultural programming and grooming. So I don't, I guess another question is like, how do we kind of like intercept? Because I don't know that showing those images, the non-binary, surgical images, is enough to wake people out of this mass psychosis. And yeah, we're using that term. We've both watched the Dr. Malone interview with Joe Rogan, and we are using this term because this isn't groupthink. I mean, when you have people chanting trans women are women, trans men are men, that is a mass psychosis. Like Definitely. We have all the data in the world. You just look around. How were you born? Of course, there are only men and women. Of course, like there is an abundance of evidence. We are the evidence. We are sexually dimorphic species. There's enough evidence around to know that that's true. This is not groupthink. This is not a matter of just not having the right studies to convince this person of X, Y, and Z. This is absolutely a mass psychosis, hypnosis, programming mission.
And I would say as well that it's very important to understand how certain movements are interlinked and often won't exist without the other one. I don't believe you could have the trans movement, the trans deception, without having internet pornography. I don't think it's actually possible. And I don't think you could have the sex work is work movement without having both trans and internet pornography. And then we see also it's not possible to have Black trans lives matter without having what all of its predecessors. So we can see that one movement goes to another. I mean, the HRC is literally what I'm trying to think. Imagine you are a Black trans identified male. Then the HRC is telling you that you are basically at risk of murder walking down the street. You are, and they're inventing these statistics. They're calling people that die inside of their homes, people that are killed by male partners. They're saying to them, you are at an existential threat of imminent murder. That's a terrible thing to say to somebody. Absolutely horrific, especially when we know that the vast majority of what you say Black trans women are actually just gay men that they've forced, that lots of times violent pimps have forced them to dress up, especially in Brazil. They're forced to cross dress and walk the streets, and we're saying that you are at that's what the HRC is doing. They're saying you're so oppressed and so and life is so terrible for you and you're never going to get out of it, and we're going to save you and liberate you. And I think it's just such a crazy thing to say, because it's entirely fabricated. And you have, imagine what happened after Dave Chappelle's stand-up special. You had all of these people from the Black Trans Lives Matter movement just lying. Just lying and saying all of these ridiculous and ludicrous things. You actually had Jill Soloway, who is the creator of Transparent, right? Which is the So you actually had her saying trans people are in the middle of a Holocaust. Right. So I was like, whoa, they're taking trans-identified people, putting them on trains and taking them to Dave Chappelle concerts. Like what kind of it was. And the way she said it was so serious. She was like, there is a Holocaust. And everyone's like, yes. What are you saying? That's a really terrible thing to be instilling into people, this massive fear, saying to them, you are at risk of being murdered in the streets. It's just so crazy.
Oh, I remember that show. I was totally I was a trans cult ally at that point when that show came out, and that did so much damage to so many people. Because I know it really solidified like my beliefs in trans ideology when I watched that show. Oh yeah. It was a fantastic plot line. It was well produced. They were captivating characters, like despite, versus when I think of like the Sex and the City mind control programming, like it's just sloppy, it's just bad. Like people who are not even into trans ideology or who like couldn't give a shit are complaining about what a terrible job they did for the kind of the remake. But yeah, no, I found Transparent to be a very well produced show. That I found it to be really captivating, albeit total mind control programming.
Right. And also, but the thing about Jill Soloway and that whole show is that, did you know that her father is an AGP?
No, but that makes sense.
Right. So let's examine, like, much like Sarah Ramirez, Jill Soloway, heterosexual relationship for 25 years. And, she goes on the Ellen show, I think in 2015. She's incredibly gender conforming. She looks a little bit like a soccer mom. And then her father comes out as AGP at the age of 75. And then she decides that she's no longer Jill Soloway. She's now Joey Soloway. And she's non-binary and queer. So it's like...
Oh, that's like, kind of the plot line of the show.
Right. Because I think that she is Allie. Isn't she Allie in the show?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Right. Right. It's like her father is this like renowned kind of professor, academic. And then they're kind of on these parallel paths of discovering, who they are, their most authentic selves. And he comes out as a woman, and she, declares herself as like queer, non-binary, bisexual.
Yeah. But also it's interesting because when I watched that, I was like, they've really bastardized the Jewish religion. Because quite honestly, there's, and this is actually happening time and time again. I really see this a lot, is that trans ideology appropriates an inordinate amount of a fringe Judaism. I actually recently reported on an AGP who writes for a Jewish women's magazine. And what he did was he's written some incredibly bizarre pieces that's trying to support transgenderism in a Jewish way. But what he did was he went to some Israeli LGBT organization that have written this absolutely indecipherable kishkush, I don't know what you call it, indecipherable, just nonsense. It's just gobbledygook is what I call it. And they've actually rehashed this and put it out. What's this guy doing? He's actually writing for a women's magazine, and nobody's questioning this. He's using the women's mikvah, the ritual bath. He's calling himself an Orthodox Jewish woman. It's very, very disgusting. And you see this happens time and time again where they appropriate Jewish mysticism and Jewish history as part of kind of their own, latest and greatest thing.
I mean, I've seen it with the Muslim religion as well, where the men will fetishize the hijab. So that makes sense. I mean, there really are no boundaries, like anything to validate what they're doing. And so to draw, it makes sense that they would draw, like particularly like the richness and the history of Judaism, that they would draw from that to kind of to validate and to legitimize whatever the fuck they're doing. Yeah.
And it's the thing is that it's very, very, it's incredibly aggravating as well how many of these trans activists also claim to be Jewish or kind of claim to do this kind of conversion to Judaism. And then they start speaking on behalf of Jews. It's actually, I perceive it to be incredibly anti-Semitic. Okay, imagine this. There are people online, men, who are putting on Jew face, like Jewish women's clothes, right? So if anybody doesn't know, Jewish Orthodox women have a very particular way of dressing. It's an absolute like dress code. If you're Jewish, then you just understand it. You see it. Very particular way of wearing their wigs. I mean, it's just, you can't deny it, right? It's a total dress code. And you have these guys who are fetishizing it so much that they're putting on wigs. One of the guys calls himself Shuli Elisheva, and he actually wrote on Twitter that he says, I've been welcomed and embraced in vulnerable women-only spaces where women know I'm trans. I'm in a women's divorce group. I'm in a fandom group for Orthodox Jewish women. I attend weekly female-only meetings about trauma, and I'm not just tolerated, I'm embraced. And this guy, I'm telling you, is hard. He is Buffalo Bill. That's how I perceive him, is to be Buffalo Bill. And the amount of handmaidens that support men like him and legitimize men like him and legitimize them using our bathrooms and our spaces and actually bastardizing our religion as well is unforgivable. Just really unforgivable.
Right. I mean, that makes so much sense to me why an autogynephile would want to be in a space that like so deliberately celebrate and has ritual and practice around female biology. That makes so much sense. Like, it's not enough to kind of be perceived in like the secular world as a woman. Like, he wants to be initiated, in a space. Like, he wants to have the markers of womanhood as they, exist within Orthodox Judaism. That makes so much sense. And it also allows for homosexuality within Orthodox Judaism, right? Like, if he is accepted as a woman, then surely there's some loophole where, like, under Jewish law, he can fuck another man.
No, I mean, absolutely not. There's no In any event, even if that were the case, right, these guys are all heterosexual. These guys that come out in their 30s and in their 40s, they're all straight. I mean, they all want to be with women, and their desire to be with, if they have a desire to be with men, it's pseudo bisexuality, right? They want to be treated like a woman by a man. But, you know, these guys, I mean, the one that I'm kind of thinking about in particular, but he's, you know, completely representative of all of the Orthodox Jewish women LARPers, right? All of these men, is that he's manufacturing a situation where he is actually going to be touched by a Jewish woman. Right? When I think about the mikvah, when I think about when you go there, you have to disrobe, you have to be inspected, they have to check and see. Nobody, I'm not saying that anybody feels you up, but any Jewish woman who knows it. They check your ears, they check the soles of your feet. And it's a woman that has to do this. And traditionally, it's an elder in the community. It's not a younger woman. It's a woman of stature who performs that role. I mean, normally there's a tradition, I don't know if it's a law, but the woman who does that must be married and her husband must be alive. It's a role of a wise woman in the community. And this is not some kind of like, you know, new age kind of like healing yourself, right? You know, it's something which is very rooted in a practice which is, you know, it's the center of a married woman's sex life, if I can try to kind of put it to you like that. And this person, this man, is entirely appropriating it, and it's for nothing more than a fetish, nothing more than that. I mean, that is how low, you know, that's how low and degrading this whole thing is.
And it's absolutely not kosher for her to touch this man. So then what happens? Like, what is in like the cases you know about, like, have women refused because it's like on the one hand, they're being asked to see this man as a woman, and on the other hand, it's against Jewish law to like touch this man's naked body.
Yeah. So first of all, I have to say, I think that there's a lot of lying going on. Because this guy, you know, he calls himself Shuli Elisheva. His last name is actually Zarin. He's just a man. But he actually posts endlessly on Twitter, about all of these manufactured situations where apparently after his penile inversion surgery, a nurse came and took a look at it and said, I had no idea that you weren't a cis woman. I mean, these things don't happen. It's just nonsense. And apparently, according to him, the doctor also said, it looks nicer than mine. I mean, I don't know about you, but I've been to the gynecologist, I've been to nurses. They've never said to me, oh, you've got a lovely coochie. I mean, could you imagine what that would, nonsense. He also claims, a lot of them, and I haven't seen this man claim it, but I've seen other men claim to use the women's mikvah, but I don't think it happens. But I think that what's even worse is that by them being normalized and platformed by this women's magazine, they're desensitizing other women to this harmful practice. Okay, you have in between the healthy eating recipes and the kind of the self-help articles about what to do if you're going through a divorce, right? You have Nick's page. I knew I was a woman because I felt I was, and here's a big long explanation of my surgery, and now I'm using the women's bathroom, and now I'm praying in the women's section. I mean, I have to ask these women, what on earth are you thinking? Why are you doing this to us? Why on earth are you wanting to desensitize women to this practice? And why also are you silencing at the same time? Because a lot of people have spoken out against us. A lot of women have spoken out against us. Why are you silencing us? Why on earth, like, are you so ingrained and obsessed with, the like basically male, I don't know what it is. Is it worship? Is it male worship? Or is it just this, it's male supremacy, probably. Are you so obsessed, and is it so ingrained inside of you that you actually platform a man who pretends to be a woman than any other female writer? I mean, shame on them. Shame on them.
Wow, that's so fascinating about, yeah, what you were saying earlier about what's going on with Orthodox Judaism. It's not something that I considered that was so pervasive.
I've seen this be incredibly normalized over the last couple of years, but especially in the last year, there's really been quite a number of trans-identified, kind of trans children charities that have sprung up, of course, because of ROGD. And there's a number of what I think are incredibly narcissistic mothers. You can have them in the secular community, you can have them in the religious community. It really doesn't seem to matter at the moment, who are coming out and getting an insane amount of praise, an insane amount of social credit for coming out and saying, look at me, look at my child. Am I so wonderful and accepting and beautiful? I'm a better mother than you. They love their children so much that they take them to Thailand for genital surgery. That's love.
It's like a completely manufactured battlefield. Like it's a completely synthetic, manufactured, like, orchestra of a non-issue created. Well, that's now like something that can be with quotes diagnosed, a complete, like, fabrication of the pharmaceutical industry, that now you're this, like, warrior parent in this battlefield fighting for the life of your child. Like, it's like almost as if, I mean, we are so divorced of, like, animal kingdom predators, or, like, at least, in the US, like, we are not sending, like, our sons to war. Like, it's not mandatory to send your son to war. It's like you have to create this fake battle. It's like, or not that they've created, but they've been preyed upon to play the characters in this manufactured battlefield, in this war.
Well, it's a signal that they're better people. I mean, I actually I was recently staying with a friend who is a lesbian, and she and just for fun, she decided to download Tinder, because I wanted to see how many trans-identified males were on it. And not only, of course, there's hundreds of trans-identified males, if not thousands, and in fact, 1 out of every 3 is a trans-identified male. But not only that, what I saw was an inordinate amount of women who were saying that they're writing, first of all, their pronouns, signaling they're better than you. Then they're saying triple vaxxed and will get booster. I love Moderna. Then they're saying all cops are bastards, number 3. Then number 4, they're saying no turfs, no swerfs is a big one. But then it's kind of like, right, but imagine if this is a real dating. Imagine if I wasn't downloading that for a joke, right, with a friend to see what was written. Imagine that was genuine and you were looking to find either a one-night stand or a partner. What are you telling me about you? Absolutely nothing. You have all of these things, and it's like as if I'm really going to change my mind about who you are as a person because you've written BLM forever or whatever on your bio. And these are not, by the way, these aren't teenagers. We're talking like women in their 40s and 50s who have completely fallen into this. I do believe that it's a mass hysteria. I think people are really afraid of being called any of these phobias or names, that they're falling into this. And there's a crazy amount of young women. When I say young women, I mean women under 50 who are identifying unironically as furries and queer non-binaries. I mean, the furry also is something which is really, really common.
Wow. And can you just tell everyone what a furry is?
Okay. Oh my gosh. Wow, a furry. So a furry is someone who dresses up in those like doggy costumes, and they get together. It is a sexual thing. People who tell you it's not a sexual thing, it definitely is a sexual thing. But also, what they tend to do, as well as furry, they also do a lot of DDLG, which is daddy dom little girl, which is where you see the kind of the little girl, the women, grown women, and they dress up as toddlers, and they have to go, daddy, please, can I have another glass of milk? It's really disturbing to see. And I think not only has social justice warrior kind of brought this on, but we also cannot forget about 50 Shades of Grey. 50 Shades of Grey was also instrumental in normalizing DDLG.
Okay, so we've spent so far talking about like all the fuckery, and what we haven't gotten into yet is how, like, the point of entry for little girls, right? Because we're talking about grooming here. We know how adults have been groomed. We've seen mass hypnosis around our peers, people our age and even older. But yeah, I want to get more into the points of entry and really what any girl using the internet is led to believe, like what a woman is or what a woman isn't, or like that a woman even exists, honestly. I also want to say, like, what prompted this episode is I've been coming across, I mean, many things, but because I spend a lot of time on Instagram, I came across Travis Barker. So Travis Barker is a famous drummer who's dating Kardashian, and he has a daughter who's 16 years old now. However, her Instagram account, I think the earliest images, I think she's maybe 11 in some of the photos. She turned 16 Christmas of 2020-21. So if you assume that she's posting photos, the photos she's posted is around the same time as when the photo was taken. We can assume that she was 11 years old in some of the photos. Some of the really provocative ones, she's about 13 years old. And it's just she's a fully, pornified girl like that. I mean, she, when I saw the image of her when she's like 15 or 16, I was like, wow, this looks like a 27-year-old. Like, she looks so much older than she is because she's totally pornified. She has tons of makeup. Her breasts are exposed, and she's wearing really, really expensive things. Like, she would either be a super, super expensive prostitute or the daughter of this super rich, celebrity. Because why on earth would a 14-year-old have access to what looks like plastic surgery, tons of makeup, fancy clothes, so it's hard to compute even looking at the images. A number, when I shared her account, a number of women wrote to me and they're like, how is it even possible that she could have, breast implants?
Do you think she does have breast implants?
I don't necessarily think she does, but I think the question was interesting because the woman was alarmed that a 13-year-old could have breast implants. Meanwhile, we've just talked about the normalization of the non-binary, surgeries and the mutilation of children under the guise of trans ideology. So of course, there are surgeons who are willing to put breast implants in, 13-year-old, 14-year-old girls. Like that part doesn't surprise me. It was an interesting, an interesting question.
Well, what she certainly, what she certainly does have is the kind of the stare. Everybody knows what I'm talking about. It's the come to bed eyes. It's the kind of the bimbo stare. It's like the, I can't even really do it. It's this look, which is, of course, very, very popular with, you might see Giselle doing it, or the Victoria's Secret models doing this kind of staring into nowhere. But what she's probably done is she's got very, very heavily filtered Instagram pictures, because when I look at pictures of her from when she was 11, when she was 12 to now, it's obvious that she's had a massive amount of filtering done to her face. And it's important to know every kid is looking through the lens, through Instagram with filters. Nobody's putting up a picture of themselves to Instagram naturally without a filter. And it makes a lot of these, of course, it's immensely pornified, and it's so troubling and so disgusting. But it also makes them look a little bit non-human. I think a woman filtered her face beyond recognition. I mean, Khloe Kardashian is one who does it a lot, and she actually doesn't look like herself anymore. She looks like another person. But a lot of the time, there's so many filters done, and the very wide set eyes and the very pointy kind of jaw, it does make the person look almost like an alien. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing more alien as well than removing your sex organs. And also, so I do want to talk a little bit about hentai. People might think that what 12-year-old girls, what 13-year-old girls, what 14-year-old boys are watching in terms of porn is the traditional sex of a man and a woman, or whatever. But no, they're actually watching what's called hentai a lot. It's a very, very popular, very, very popular, I think actually the most popular. And what they have there, it's Japanese anime sex. So you can have a drawing of a 12-year-old, and it literally looks like a 12-year-old who's having sex or being beaten or any manner of horrific things. And not just by a man, you'll often have it by some kind of a beast. So it's like a crossover between a human and a snake, or the genitals will actually be incongruent with a human's. So instead of having a penis, they'll have some kind of a dragon, or there's a lot of that. And also, what hentai is far more graphic than regular pornography, because it allows you to do what the human body cannot. So if you think about what ordinary degrading porn is, ordinary degrading porn can only go as far as the human body can go. And of course, we know there are dark corners of the internet where you will find horrible things with children, but I'm talking on Pornhub, which is, the number one place where they get access to this. There's no age limits. You could theoretically have a hentai with a baby. You could have a hentai pornography with a girl who's ambiguously 5. You can paint that it's incest. You can paint that it's brother and sister. You can paint that it's, sister and sister, or even you can even make up all these crazy scenarios. So now, the girl has been raped. Rape is a very common theme in hentai. And now you see the baby growing inside of her, like almost like a kind of an alien. And she has been impregnated by this rape alien. The whole thing is so twisted and so crazy. That it's no wonder to me that kids are becoming addicted to it, because a lot of parents come to me. I speak to a lot of parents who are going through this absolute hell with their kids. And a lot of them are incredibly surprised that all of these anime drawings that their kids are doing are things that are replicated in hentai. And one mother in particular, I know she'd really attribute everything that happened to her daughter to hentai pornography. So we should not think about whether or not children are accessing, or young people or young women are accessing, gonzo porn, right? I mean, some are, but it's the incredibly disturbing anime porn, which is way more violent, way more racist, actually, and a lot more crossed over with pedophilia. And we know how prevalent pedophilia is. I was recently at a porn conference in Washington, D.C., where I saw that they're producing real dolls, right? So they're the dolls. When people think about a sex doll, they normally think about a blow-up doll with a hole in it. Very, very crass, very, very crude. This is not what dolls are all about nowadays. Now, dolls are nearly as heavy as a human. The skin, I touched one, the skin is kind of like, it doesn't quite feel like flesh, but it does have kind of a consistency to it. And a lot of them now are being created at the height of a child, the body of a child with massive breasts. And by the way, these dolls are being bought up at record rates, right? Just absolutely record rates. They have a booming business that's not going anywhere. So you have on one side of the spectrum the hypersexualized young girls that are on TikTok, and then on the other side of the spectrum you also have 335 TikToks with the hashtag top surgery. So you see how you're either sexed to the max at the age of 11, or you're going down the path to de-sex yourself. And I think that this whole thing is moving us in a direction of a non-human future.
That's such a interesting point about the limits of human biology, which kind of coming back to the non-binary surgeries, like, like it not being enough to have a penis and an anus, like you must have a third way to experience sex.
Yeah, and with the limits of the human body, it gives you what hentai provides, a lot of that, a lot of those fantasies, a lot of the more twisted sexual fantasies, I would say. Hentai pornography, if you watch it, if you see any of it, it clearly comes from the mind of an incredibly disturbed person. It's very dark and twisted. And if we think about traditional degrading pornography, we think about, college girls having fun, and we think about relatively healthy looking women, right? I mean, very skeletal looking women are not making it big in pornography, right? They're generally looking healthy. I mean, I'm not defending porn, but I'm just saying, if you look at your average,
by healthy, you mean not anorexic. Yeah.
They look like they're fed.
Right.
They look like they're fed. There's makeup on them to make them look lively and whatever.
They're not like corpse-like.
Right. But in hentai, they're all incredibly small, incredibly frail looking. And it's crossing over so much. There's no curvature, right? With
like
the
a
hentai.
child.
Like a child, or like something that's crossing over into non-humans. And with the non-binary surgeries, I couldn't think of any way to try to visibly signify that you're not human, or that you don't want to be human, or that you're trying to somehow transcend the human experience, right? And it's not transcending at all. It's incredibly limiting to remove all of your sex organs and never experience, intimacy ever with a person. But I think that transhumanism, especially as we're seeing the willingness of the medical industry to lose all morals, all patient obligation, to not really be taking this oath very seriously anymore. I mean, entire corruption of the medical community. And I don't think there's a period in time where people have had less trust in the scientific and medical elites
Yeah, I would agree with that. A little girl watching hentai could go one of two ways, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or would you say a girl that's consuming hentai porn will likely go the desexed route?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, because I would say that I would say that for me, it's incredibly clear when I look at, for example, Travis Barker's daughter, that she has been influenced, if not by porn, she's been influenced by porn culture.
Mm-hmm.
And if we want to think about just how far we've come, in terms of, 20 years ago, Britney Spears dressed up in the schoolgirl outfit, that was seen as being incredibly risque. That was seen, and she was at the time, I think, 17, and she never got nude, right? In that video, she was wearing a crop top, and it was, I look back on it now and I think it was incredibly wholesome. To now we've gotten to this stage where you can have fully the chest of a young girl exposed, but just the nipples covered. We've actually come that far. So it's obvious to me that she has been influenced by porn culture. And by the way, something like Nicki Minaj, WAP, that whole video and that whole concept absolutely came from the mind of somebody who has consumed an inordinate amount of porn, inordinate amounts. And it's now being created, and now that's being performed very much in the mainstream. And Nicki Minaj and it is also another one who's had intense body modification. We call it the BBL, the Brazilian butt lift, where you take fat from other areas in the body and you put it into the butt. But it's not like a round rump that looks healthy. It's this non-human. I think she looks deformed. I really think that she's deformed herself. And I don't think that women who get breast implants have deformed themselves. Okay. I don't. I'm not going to say I'm pro plastic surgery. And I don't think that they always look disgusting. But this aesthetic, this look, this trend towards morphing into something which we can never be. It's the whole idea, and the whole trend with plastic surgery was always to look as though this could be natural. This could be you, right? You may have liposuctioned your fat arse to look, nice and lifted, and you're lifting your face so that it looks the way it could. But now you're actually getting plastic surgery to look like you've had plastic surgery. You're trying on an aesthetic to look like a non-human version of yourself. And that's also the trend with the non-binary surgeries, because the idea of the vaginoplasty is that you're making your penis look like another human sex organ. The idea with non-binary is that you're trying to achieve an aesthetic which can never exist and doesn't exist.
Right. Right. And then it used to be, at least when I was growing up, I knew a handful of like women who had breast implants. And then I knew that older women were sometimes getting plastic surgery. And that was the extent of what I knew about body modification. I knew about tattoos and piercings, but now the rate of plastic surgery and the rate of body modification, even outside of gender ideology, is the age bracket is just getting younger and younger and younger. So what you mentioned earlier is young girls don't necessarily have to watch porn, right, to be influenced by a non-human kind of porn aesthetic, because it's everywhere. And it's become its own ideal. It's not just that women are being marketed to look younger. It's that they're being marketed to look like men, to look like non-human, non-binary, alien, disformed flesh. So I want to get into the role of OnlyFans and
Oh,
GoFundMe. I know you've done a lot of
oh.
research on GoFundMe, and yeah, I would love
Yeah,
to hear
so
about that.
okay, so GoFundMe was initially set up and Kickstarter and things like that. They were initially set up so that you could give to charity, and it would be a very like one-on-one type of thing. Like, so I would say, for example, that I want to raise, I don't know, bail money for my son or whatever it is, right? And I want the community to try to chip in. Or I have this idea for an airplane that runs on vegetable oil, and I want everybody to try and chip in. And that's the way GoFundMe was for years and years and years. But in the last, I would say 3 years, GoFundMe has really accepted all manner of teenagers who are raising money to remove their healthy breast organs. If you go into GoFundMe and you search the term top surgery, you'll get thousands and thousands and thousands of results. If you put in non-binary surgery, you get around 2,000 results. So that's 2,000 people, and they're mainly women who are looking to raise money for their non-binary surgeries. On top of that, OnlyFans. So OnlyFans, it has wildly taken off in 2020 because porn shoots were closed. People were
People
no
were out of
longer
work, spending
a
more
lot
time
of
at home.
right, but OnlyFans is kind of like an MLM in the way that
Mm.
in the way that it recruits young women. Just the other day at a few weeks ago, months ago at the porn conference, I met a lot of women who were doing OnlyFans, and I asked them, how well are you doing? How much money are you making? And no one's making bank. No one's making a lot of money. But the way that they kind of get in and they get the hook is that they hear a lot of mythical stories about, for example, Tana Mojo, who's making like $1 million a month on it because she already has a branding and already has a platform. So you're kind of told that it's like very, very easy money and you're selling nudie pictures. But it's not like that in any way whatsoever. And a lot of FTMs are joining to raise money for surgery. Now, your average FTM does not make any money on OnlyFans. I managed to find quite a number of them who are doing, simulated sex with a skeleton, and it's super, super degrading. And they're not raising the money that they actually, it's very sad that they're not raising money, to achieve any of these, unattainable goals. But OnlyFans does really operate as an MLM in the way that you get your friends to come join OnlyFans with you. And some of that really is to feel, I think, like misery loves company. Like, because
Mm.
those pictures are out there forever, whether you want it or not, right? And if you think about traditional prostitution, women don't need to meet their Johns ever again. Women don't need to be reminded constantly that they ever had a John or that they ever had a pimp. But now you're seeing 18-year-olds making this decision to raise money on OnlyFans, whether it's for surgery or not. And those pictures are out there forever. And the normalization of OnlyFans has become something which I think is truly, truly frightening, because AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, she actually she found this article which was about a paramedic that lost her job after her pictures were found on OnlyFans, and she took it and she retweeted "sex work is work." Now, that troubles me greatly, because Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is a very big inspiration, or she's definitely somebody who I think a lot of young women look up to, whether or not they agree with her politics or they don't agree with her politics.
She's massive influence.
She's a very attractive woman in a position of power. And she's saying sex work is work and promoting at the same time this whole concept of OnlyFans. So, it's very, very troubling to see that this kind of thing being normalized. And I would say that GoFundMe and OnlyFans, they exist at this intersection of exploitation, right? You have them together, right? It's basically, whether you want to see it that way, I mean, it's begging for money. It's an incredibly degrading thing to do, to be in a position where you're selling your nude photos. And also with OnlyFans, what you do is you create a one-on-one connection with your subscribers. So you're DMing with them, messaging with them. This is a level of contact with a pornographer that we've never had ever.
Right.
I mean,
and they're taking direct requests. I mean, part of OnlyFans is asking, what kind of fruit would you like me to eat topless in my backyard?
Mm-hmm.
Like, but as specific as the buyer wants.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it always goes into the more depraved and the more degrading, the more money you're going to make. But the average woman only makes $179 on OnlyFans. But what's even more distressing to me
is that per month.
Per month. Yeah. The average woman makes $179. So don't be fooled that these women are like laughing all the way to the bank and we're just a couple of old crows that aren't with it. Like, they're not making any money. Oh, it's true though. They would be making a lot more money engaging in street prostitution. And you know how we both feel about that. So with the GoFundMe, what's even more distressing is that lots of people pay into these GoFundMes, lots and lots and lots. I mean, it's almost kind of like a bit of initiation into the cult. Yeah. Like if you're part of, if you become trans identified, you now have to start giving to trans lives. And often what you'll see with the GoFundMe is that they will say in the tagline, I'm a Black trans woman, or I'm a Black non-binary person. So they're trying to kind of play off of this, or, I'm a queer, poly, non-binary, Jewish. Like, they try and put in
ADHD,
all of these,
dyslexic,
left-handed, whatever. Yeah. And it's like, why are you giving yourself all these bizarre identities and raising money? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And raising money to do it. Yeah. I mean, and also I've noticed that along, with the kind of virtue signaling bios with the pronouns and the all cops are bastards, it's really common to come across a link, like an Instagram or on Twitter, you can choose one link, and a lot of people will virtue signal by linking a GoFundMe to a double mastectomy fund. Yeah.
Linking a double mastectomy fund. Yeah. It's absolutely crazy. It's also crazy how much money everybody's making out of this issue. I mean, GoFundMe takes a chunk, right? OnlyFans, they take a chunk. Everybody's taking a chunk out of this absolute mass hysteria, mass psychosis. I don't know what it is, but I do know what it is. It is mass hysteria. But big corporations are making bank off of this. Like, you want to know why this is so popular? This is a corporate cult. Right. It really is. It's
and also like the path that like the grooming, 30 years ago, to be groomed in this kind of like exploitative way, like let's say for street prostitution, or let's say to become a surrogate, like you would have to be like physically contacted, approached. There would have to be multiple meetings. Now the
Mm-hmm.
path to exploitation is so much more direct, right? Like all these websites, you mentioned this to me before, like you're saying you don't think without obviously like the internet and all these platforms and social media that make it so easy to get set up. Like anyone can be a porn star because all you like, as long as you have a female body and an internet connection, like you can start the process of exploitation so easily. It is so routine. It is so accessible. I mean, not even that. You can just have an Instagram account and post semi-nude photos of yourself and develop a following and monetize that, So I think just so accessible to become this person, to be this girl. It's not difficult. I mean, honestly, I think it's impossible. It'd be slightly, I find it almost impossible to not become that without internet access or a phone. I mean, how could you possibly avoid it?
Right. Also, it's something very interesting that Dr. Oren Amity said to me a few years ago. He said to me that non-binary identified teenagers are far more likely to not have any kind of gender issues, but what they actually have is the beginning of borderline personality disorder, which is this disproportionate level of narcissism. And we see that narcissism plays a huge role in all of this, right? Making somebody have your pronouns. Posting 500 selfies is very, very narcissistic, obviously. Asking other people to pay for your surgeries, very, very narcissistic. So, and also imagine the dopamine level response that you get when somebody tells you that you're attractive, right? So then you have that button, that like, and the money. But then when it goes away, that's an incredibly hollow feeling. I mean, something that runs through all of this entire movement is the shallowness and the emptiness of these people, and the way that there's absolutely no intellectual complexity to me in somebody who writes all cops are bastards, ACAB, and NB, they, them. There's no intellectual complexity to you. That tells me all I need to know, to be honest.
Wow, it's just really bleak. When we were getting ready for, for this conversation, I drew like I had our topics that we were going to talk about, and then 2 arrows, and one arrow leads to a square with just 2 straight lines to like symbolize the scars of the double mastectomy, and the other little square has 2 circles with dots to symbolize like fake boobs. Like what are the, like it's feeling really bleak. It's feeling really, really, really bleak. I mean, given what we know about the stats, given what we know about the sterilization, the mutilation, this mostly being targeted, 90% of the people going through with these surgeries being women, where does that put us, 10, 20 years from now?
Well, okay. So the truth of the matter is the only way out of this is through it. We just have to go through it. And we see that movements absolutely come to an end. Periods of mass hysteria and mass psychosis absolutely come to an end. There's going to be an incredible amount of victims left over at the end of this. We know that already. But we absolutely can't lose hope and just completely despair, because what really gives me a lot of optimism and a lot of excitement is the fact that every day, I meet more people who completely think like me. They might not be at the level that I am yet, right? But every single day, I meet new people who are agreeing with what I say, who think that children can never be sterilized, must never be sterilized. They want to get the message out. They want to mobilize. And that gives me a lot of cause for hope. It also gives me an incredible amount of hope that people like Sex and the City have been as arrogant as they have, as to assume that we all go along with this gender nonsense, and to put a character like Shay Diaz and write her in there with all of her, non-binary identities and ludicrousness. I think that's actually very good, because the more this gets out, the more that reasonable people will make a reasonable decision.
It's getting pretty sloppy.
Because, this whole thing, this whole ideology, it's made up of lies. So it can never continue. It can't have any long-term, it cannot have any longevity, because it's all predicated on nonsense. Either it's predicated on, science nonsense, like we aren't born without a sex, or it's predicated on just, just complete lies, like men can become women and there's no conflict of interest, etc., or that your non-binary surgery will make you happier. The idea that they could be as stupid to put that woman on the cover of New York Magazine, and they really just did not think that people were going to read this and go, what on earth is this? It was like, well, what was it? My penis, myself, or something.
Yeah. I didn't need a penis to become a man. I needed a penis to become myself.
I mean, that's just bizarre. I mean, it's so science fiction and so culty. And I think that even when I looked on, woke Twitter, people were still like, oh, what is this? And the graphic nature, nobody ever really wants to think about what it really means to be a pregnant man, right? What does that even mean, a pregnant man? Oh, it's interesting. Men can become pregnant too, right? But then when people start to Google, can men get pregnant? And the answer is yes, it happens. People start to say, I really don't enjoy this. I don't like the fact that you're gaslighting me, lying to me. And also, it's such an insult to people's intelligence, things like Sex and the City and things like the New York Magazine article, because people smell it. They go, this is horrible. This is awful. So the more they do that, the more empowered I feel to keep on going and to keep on talking and to keep on speaking. And I know that your message is getting through to people. Just with what you're doing, just with this podcast, you're getting through to people, you're educating them about this. And we all can do this. We all can just go out and speak and say to people, no more, I don't want this anymore.
If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support my work, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. To stay in the loop for my latest coaching programs, hypnosis sessions, free resource guides, and more, follow me on Instagram at whosebodyisit and visit my website, whosebodyisit.com.